Hi everyone, I'm Jane, and today we are going to paint another version of La Fleur. This one I call La Fleur Noire. Make sure you check out the video description below for a full list of materials, and let's get started. Now for the background, I'm going to use this soft round brush, and this is kind of my scrubbing brush. It's just a cheap old brush, probably 3/8 of an inch wide at the bottom. It doesn't really matter what kind of a brush you use here. You could even use a filbert brush. The thing you want to make sure of is that it's a soft brush and that the top of it is fairly rounded because we're going to make some clouds. The colors I'm going to be using here are titanium white and a new color you've never seen me use before, Ivory Black. Now, Ivory Black is completely different from Mars Black. It's a much softer color and it's much more transparent. When you use Mars Black, it's very easy to overwhelm white with the black, but in the case of Ivory Black, it's really easy to overwhelm the black with white. So I want to make my sky fairly light up at the top and gradually getting darker, but I don't want to go too terribly dark. So that's why I chose Ivory Black. So I'm going to grab a bit of it and mix it in with my white. And notice how that little bit of black I got did not make this too dark or strong of a gray. In fact, I'm going to make it a pretty light gray, almost white. Very, very light color. I'm going to hold my brush almost parallel to the canvas. So I'm not going straight on like this, about like this. And I'm just going to kind of start scrubbing up here at the top. Just scrub some of this color in. I'm going to do this all the way across the top, mixing up more color when I need. And if your color is a little bit different, more white or more black each time, that doesn't matter. We're doing clouds, so there's going to be a lot of variations in there anyway. You can scrub in a circle like that, or you can go back and forth. Try mixing it up and doing all kinds of shapes. I'm going to bring that down just a little bit more. See how up here I'm not trying to blend those two together. This is a little darker than the first layer, so I just feel like that helps insinuate a cloud there. But see how I'm scrubbing the brush. So I've pretty much got the full length of the brush on the canvas, and I'm kind of rotating it like that. Once I start getting some more variation in color here, you'll be able to see how the tip of the brush helps create a cloud effect a little bit more. So I'm just kind of working from the top down, from side to side, always overlapping the previous section, but making it kind of irregular. So I'm not going to scrub in a straight circle like this all the way across because I'll just get bands. I'm making some parts of it higher, some parts of it lower. So I'm going to go up kind of high there, and a little lower over here, maybe higher up on this side. So that's what I want you to do, just really irregular cloud shapes. I'm going to bring you in a little bit closer here so that you can see exactly what my brush is doing. So see how I've got the full length of it placed, and I'm scrubbing kind of in a circle and letting the tip of the brush just kind of push the paint around. So the pressure I'm putting on the brush is actually right here. I've got the whole length from here to the tip on the canvas, but when I'm scrubbing, the pressure is really right there where my finger is. That way, the tip of the brush is free to just kind of push paint in a shape, while at the bottom, notice it kind of fuzzes out because there's not a lot of paint right here. So let me show you one more time and then I'll zoom you out so you can get kind of the full picture. A little extra white on the tip of my brush. All right, now that you know what I'm doing, we'll zoom you out a little bit. And every time I go back for paint, I mix up a slightly different color. If I feel like that color I just mixed up wasn't different enough, and I can just grab more of one or the other. I just want to give a very subtle idea of clouds. I'm not trying to paint these super dark thunderclouds, but you definitely can. The reason I'm not going to go very dark here is because I want my flower to be the main focal point. So I feel like if I get too dark with my clouds, then my flower will kind of get washed into the background a bit. Just going to bring that down a little lower. That's why I'm going side to side there. I'm not trying to fuzz this out or blend it in. I'm just bringing that color down a little bit farther. And back to scrubbing my cloud shape. Start getting a little bit of a darker color in there. So this painting was inspired by a photo that someone posted into our Art Monster Squad Facebook page. It was a gorgeous photo of a stormy sky with a bright yellow field underneath and some thistles. And I loved that photo so much, but I didn't want to copy it. So I just took the elements of it that I really liked and then worked them so that it would be my painting. So if you've seen my video, Fleur, this is kind of a part 2 to that, kind of a companion piece. I've kind of felt a little bit stuck and artistically blocked lately, and I've had a really hard time coming up with paintings that I really like to teach you guys. You know, I always want to make sure I'm bringing you something new and teaching you something that you haven't learned before, but at the same time, sometimes it's a challenge to do that while still maintaining my own artistic voice. And it can be really difficult to paint something that you don't feel completely inspired with. Again, I'm just bringing this color down a little. So because it's been summer and I've been trying to paint some, bright, happy, summery things, because that's the season, I feel like I've been spending a lot of time focusing on paintings that don't really inspire me, because summer is not really my thing. I don't like heat. I like cloudy, rainy days. And so focusing on, kind of the bright and cheerful paintings has been a little hard for me. And so I decided I needed to do something that was a little bit more me to get me out of that funk. And I forgot to tell you guys, I'm using this brush dry. I did not wet it in the jar first. Let's mix this up just a little bit darker, since we're about halfway down now. If you don't have Ivory Black or you can't find it, that's okay. You can still use Mars Black. Just be very, very careful of how much black you're adding. This color right here, this light gray, is about 50% Ivory Black to about 50% white. If I did a 50% Mars to 50% white, I would get a much darker gray. See how much black I got on there? about an equal amount of white, and I get this nice soft gray. I think Ivory Black has a little bit of a warmer tone to it too. So Mars Black, when you add it to some colors, it cools them off a little. That's why when you add it to red, like alizarin crimson, you kind of get a purpley color. Where Ivory Black seems to be a little on the warmer side. So to me, this gray seems much on the warmer side than it would if I were using Mars Black. So when I first started painting with acrylic and I bought my first Liquitex set, I was really confused as to why there were two blacks. And I thought, what do I need two blacks for? Black is black, isn't it? But that is not the case. There's a different use for each of them, just like there's a different use for zinc white versus titanium white. And it's kind of the similar thing where zinc white tends to be more transparent than ivory white, or titanium white, I'm sorry. So see, even though I'm working down and starting to get a little bit darker, I'm still adding in some lighter spots of clouds. So it doesn't have to be this perfect gradation from light to dark. Just really mix it up, get an interesting look in there. Oh, so my point in telling you that I've been feeling kind of artistically stuck lately is to remind you that if you are working on things like commissions, if you have people asking you to paint you certain things and you just don't feel motivated to do it, or you feel like you can't come up with any ideas for it, consider what it is that you're doing. What's the image? Maybe that image just doesn't inspire you, and that's okay. You know, I said before in a vlog, or I think it was a live Q&A, somebody asked me what would prevent me from doing videos on request. And one thing that would, you know, be a huge factor in whether or not I do a video based on a requested painting is if that subject inspires me. It's really, really difficult and a lot of times impossible for me to paint something that I don't feel inspired by. So there's a lot of things that some of you have been asking for a while that I just can't do. And it's not because I lack the technical ability to do it. I probably do. But if that subject matter doesn't inspire me, then I just can't figure out how to lay it out. I can't figure out what colors to use because I don't feel motivated by it. And, you know, I do my best to make sure that I'm giving you a good balance of things. You know, we got some good bright summer paintings in there, but I feel like I might have exhausted my abilities in summer paintings for the season. So we might be going back to some of my moodier work, which I really feel like I need right now. Let's get down here to be fairly dark. But I'm super excited because Halloween and fall and everything are coming in a few months anyway, and that is the time of year when I feel the most inspired. So I really hope that this fall I can bring you guys some really awesome paintings that you're going to be excited about. Especially at Halloween. I have several paintings I've been kind of holding in my back pocket until it gets closer to Halloween. All right, I'm gonna just load up with some Ivory Black and I'm just gonna fill this in here. Can you see how much more transparent that is? You can see the canvas through the paint. Where with Mars Black, you wouldn't really see that unless your brush were very wet with water. Just gonna kind of blend that line in a bit, and we're gonna layer another color down over top of it soon. But I'm gonna let this Ivory Black dry before I put my next color on it. I just want to soften that line a little bit. So I'm just barely dusting it with the very, very tip of my brush, just to take that line out. Like I can barely even feel the brush touching the canvas. That's how light of pressure I'm putting on here. Okay, there's our stormy sky. So now I'm gonna let this dry. We'll come back and add the ground, and then we will add the flower. So now we're gonna add a bright ground here. And the reason I'm doing bright, even though we have a cloudy sky, is I wanna kind of give that feeling of, you know, when it's a really cloudy day and the sky is really dark, but the sun peeks out from somewhere and all of a sudden the ground is just on fire with light. I really love that contrast. So that's what we're gonna do here. And I did buy me a brand new angle brush. This is a level 3 artist angle brush. So we're about to see how I like it. I haven't used it yet. I think this is probably the most I've ever spent on a brush. This one was $10. That's a lot for me for a brush. If I like it, I'll tell you which one it is. So I'm gonna wet it in my jar because I want this paint to spread really smoothly. So I'm gonna make sure that I use the brush nice and wet. So I want the bulk of the light to be in the background here. So I have 3 colors, my burnt umber, yellow oxide, and cadmium yellow deep hue. And I'm gonna load up with some cad yellow deep and some yellow oxide because I really love the way these colors mix together. It gives me a deep yellow, but it's very bright still. And then I'm gonna add just the tiniest bit of white to it. Just a bit. And I'm gonna start here. I'm using the edge of the brush with the tip dragging, and I'm just gonna start putting in the ground. You don't need your horizon to be real crisp. In fact, I'm gonna fade it out just a little bit in a minute. And I'm gonna let it fade out over there because I want this part of the ground here to be just a little bit darker. I just think it's more interesting if it's not a solid color all the way across, but you can do it however you like. A little extra water, and I'm gonna bring some burnt umber in. And maybe a little more. I really want this corner to be quite dark. So I'm using really light pressure there just to kind of lay the paint down. If I put full pressure on my brush, then I really smear those colors together, but I'm really just trying to lay it down. And if parts of the other colors streak through or I have lines, I'm okay with that because that's going to help insinuate some shadow and movement on the ground. Then I'm just going to thicken up this color in some of these other areas, and that's really all we're going to do to this ground. I just want it to give some light and some contrast to the flower and the sky. Again, just super light pressure there. I cleaned off my brush because I want to make sure I don't drag any of that burnt umber into the distance in the horizon. I want this to be a very bright color. So I've got my 2 yellows mixed, and I'm going to grab a bit more white. Quite a bit of white there. Get a nice bright color. And again, light pressure just to streak it in. put a little light spot in here. This is that dusting pressure. Remember, you're trying not to knock over something that's breakable. You're just trying to get the dust off of it. That's the kind of pressure I'm using. All right, so there is our background, our stormy sky with our bright yellow ground. Now I'm gonna let the ground dry for just a little bit because I did apply that paint fairly thick and I don't wanna drag it into the flower that we're about to do. And so far, I like this brush pretty good. And like I said, this is just the brand that you can get at Michael's that everybody knows about. It's their brand, but it's the level 3 brush. And so if you're looking for a pretty good angle brush and you're willing to spend a few dollars, this might be a good one for you. It was about $10. All right, now we're gonna start on the stems for our flower. And I've got me some Mars Black here, and I made sure to put it on the other side from the Ivory Black. And I'm using this round brush. This is maybe 1/4 inch round at the bottom. I think it's a little bit smaller than that. So I'm gonna load up with some black paint, and I'm gonna keep rolling it in there so that I maintain a somewhat round shape on the brush. Now this flower stem, I want to be kind of twisty and almost shriveled up and dried looking. So I'm gonna start at the bottom here, and as I bring my brush up to draw it, I'm gonna let my hand kind of move around in ways that give it some angles, and I'm gonna twist the brush just a little bit. I'm gonna roll it back and forth in my finger like that as I go. So I'm gonna start down here and just kind of, I'm not putting very much pressure on it because I just wanna get a nice thin line at first to say where the stem is gonna be. So just about like that. Get some more paint, and I'm gonna draw another stem coming off of right here. Just the same way, kind of twisting it a little, bring it up, and a little angle kind of down. And then I'm gonna do one more right here. The exact same way, up, twist it a little, and down a little bit. So that's gonna be my basic stem. Now that I know where my stem is gonna be, I can get some more paint and fill it out so that it's thicker and refine the shape anywhere. So I can put a little bit more pressure on my brush. I'm still twisting it a little bit because that helps me get, see how it created an angle there where I didn't have one? I can just cover that line up, but now the stem has a little bit more personality. I think I'm actually gonna add a little angle right there too. Still twisting it, because I don't want smooth, happy looking stems here. I'm gonna widen it just a little bit. And I might make it just a little bit wider at the bottom there. I've got a little extra water on my brush because my paint isn't spreading as smoothly as I like. I'm gonna do the same thing to this one. Still rolling my brush a bit. Give it some angles. This stem I want to be just a little bit thinner than the other ones because this one's gonna have just like a little seed pod hanging on it. So it's still gonna be twisty, just not quite as thick as the others. All right, now let's start drawing the flowers. And I do want my flowers to be purple, but I still want them to have a very dark feel to them. So I'm actually gonna paint my flowers in black first. And let's start with this one here. So I'm gonna draw off of the end of this kind of an upside down teardrop shape. And I'm gonna let that shape kind of trail off. And then I'll fill it in. Now I'm going to give it some little dried leaf bits. And what I'm going to do is start right at the stem, and I'm going to do a shape kind of like this. So here's my stem like that, and my flower is like that. So to do these leaves, I'm going to put my brush right here at the stem, and I'm going to push. See how my brush is flattening out a bit? Bring it over and twist it as I go, like we did with the stems. But as I go, not only am I twisting, I'm softening the pressure on my brush so that it thins out at the bottom. So pressure, twisting, and soften it out at the bottom. And then I can make sure it's nice and filled in. Little extra water if you're having a hard time getting your paint to flow. I'm actually going to bring that down on the inside just a little bit more. And then I'm going to do another one on the other side. This one I think I'll make a little bit smaller and maybe a little bit wilder looking. And you can add as many of these as you like. I think I might just do 2. Well, I think I'm going to do another one right here. I'm going to pretend this one's coming down from the stem, down the back of the flower. Just a small one. About like that. Our little seed pod or whatever it is really just going to be a circle. Doesn't have to be a perfect circle. This is a craggy, dried out old flower. So if it's not perfectly round, that's okay. And then I'm just going to smooth that stem into it just a little bit. All right, our main flower is going to be really fun. What I'm going to start with is kind of a little bit of an egg shape. So almost a circle right here, but a little wider at the bottom and a little bit more narrow up at the top. And fill that in. I'm going to smooth this down into the stem a bit, and I'm actually going to widen the stem just a little right below it. Same thing on this side. And then we'll put the flower on the top. I'm going to start right in the center. I've got my hand on my canvas, and my pressure on my brush is very light. I'm just using the very end of the brush. See that, how my brush is barely bending? That's what I'm going to do here. And I'm going to come out from here and just kind of flick like that. Make some longer, some smaller. They all overlap. It's really getting filled in all through here. I'm going to do that until I get about to the center line of my egg shape. About like that. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. See how my hand is stationary and it's just the tips of my fingers that are moving. And you can go through and add some longer ones if you need to. And again, just a little water if your paint is getting a little too puffy, like mine is right there. A damp brush is going to help keep a crisp line better. Now we're going to add some leaves, and the leaves are my favorite part of this. I just love the shape and the overall mood that these leaves give to this plant. Because if I did leaves that were reaching up, that would insinuate growth, that this plant is alive and growing and happy. But I'm not going to do that because I want to help with the feeling that this plant is dried and shriveled. So my leaves are actually going to point down. So similar to how I did the little leaf parts on the drooping bud, that's kind of what I'm going to do with my leaves here. I'm going to start, just pick a place, it doesn't matter where. So I'm going to start right here where we've kind of got this angle. And again, I'm gonna come off of it, press my brush flat, still kind of twist it and turn it back and forth and let that droop. And then I'm gonna widen it out a little bit more over here. This is just a really sad dried up leaf. I'm gonna add a smaller one coming off of this bud, just right down off of the stem here. And I'm gonna do one off of this stem. Now we're gonna start planning out where our highlights are gonna be. So since on the ground here, I've got the brightest part and then it's darker over here, that insinuates to me that the light source is somewhere up here on this side and it's angling this way. So most of my flower is gonna be highlighted along this side, not so much along this side of the stem or this underside of the flower here. And we'll do the color on the flower last. But first we're gonna do the highlights on the stems and leaves. So this technique we're gonna use is very similar to how we've highlighted trees in the past. So I'm loading up my brush with black paint, the same brush, the round brush, and then I'm gonna come over and grab just a tiny bit of white. And I'm gonna run that down the edge where I want my highlight to be. And you can still kind of twist your brush as you go. You don't have to wait for that first layer of black on your stems to dry. If it's still wet, it's just gonna help you with your highlights. And then I'll pick up a little bit more black and kick back any highlight areas that I don't want. Use very light pressure here because we're just trying to smear the paint together. We're not trying to blend them. We're just kind of smearing them. You can get a little bit more white if you want to amp up the highlights somewhere. I'm just gonna slash it over there. Super light pressure to just smear them in. And again, this is the Mars Black, not the Ivory Black. So I'm gonna go ahead and add all my highlights to this lower part, and then we'll deal with the flowers and leaves separately. Any little part that pokes out away, like this little angle right in here, I like to give that a bit of a brighter highlight. Right here, so this part is underneath the stem, right? Because it angles. So if my light source were coming from up here, I don't think that it would really give a bright highlight to this part under here. So I'm actually gonna put my highlight on the top, which may seem like I'm highlighting it in the wrong place, but that will give the illusion that that part of the stem is also twisted, and this part here is actually closer to you than this part underneath. So that also adds a layer of dimension. I almost went for my Ivory Black there. Might be a good idea if you're gonna use both Ivory and Mars to label them because they won't do the same thing. And just wipe off some of that if you're getting straight black, so you don't end up with just a big gray mess. See again here, notice I took my highlight off of the edge, more to the center and almost to this side. That just helps make it look like it's kind of twisting. And I love highlighting like this because you can work on it and work on it and work on it until it's perfect and you really can't mess it up. So if highlighting like this looks intimidating to you, I highly encourage you to just try it, because you can always just let it dry, paint it over with solid black, and then come back and do it again. Don't be afraid to go back and add more to other areas that you've already done. Notice I'm just putting the slightest pressure. I could probably even use a much tinier brush than this. See how I added just this teeny tiny dash of black down in here, right where this stem meets this stem, just beyond this bright highlight, right there. I think that adds a dimension of realism that says that's where that stem kind of splits off. Don't worry about the little bud right now. If you end up taking your highlight down into it, that's okay. We're gonna paint over all of that. Now up here, we're starting to get into this flower. So we're gonna do that just a little bit different. Even with the black and white part, even before we get to the purple, we're gonna do this bottom part of the flower quite a bit different. So what we're gonna do is the same type of thing, except I'm gonna let these be really short. I'm almost insinuating like little hairs, you see that? And they can go outside of the shape. Because I want it to seem kind of spiky, almost like a thistle. Let them overlap. But we're gonna keep it darker on this far bottom side. So this is almost black, but it's still a very, very dark gray. And with almost pure black, I'm gonna do the same thing, take that shape outside a little bit. And get some brighter highlights in there. See how it's just like a little flick? And get some good bright ones in there. A nice bright spot right in here. Just keep fading it out to darker as you move toward this darker side. Same thing on the little leaves here. Load it up with black, a little slash of white. And I'm going to bring it down, and you can get kind of creative with how you highlight these leaves because they're not perfectly flat. They might be kind of curled in on themselves. Just some black to help smooth that in a bit. And I actually want a good bright white highlight right there. I'm going to knock this back just a little bit, make this seem like a deep ruffle in the leaf. Get this inner part pretty dark. Same thing on this leaf here, but I think I'm going to bring the bright white right off of the stem and down this edge from the middle. Get really creative with how you highlight these leaves. Since these leaves aren't something that necessarily exist in nature, there's really not a right or wrong way to do it. However you do it is going to insinuate the way the leaf is shaped. Oh, I didn't highlight the stem yet. Let's go ahead and do that real quick. Let's make sure you can see it though. I'm going to keep it fairly dark up here, so it's almost like it's got a shadow on it from the stem above. And amp up the dark here in the center. All right, now here we want to say what is part of the leaf and what is part of the flower. So we're gonna do the leaves on this flower the same way as we did the leaves hanging down. You just wanna pay attention to where you want that leaf to be. So I'm gonna take my bright white highlight down here first. That's just to give my eye a place to look, to say that's part of the leaf, not the flower. And you can kick it back to as light as you need it to be, just as long as you can still see it, you know where the edge is. So I'm taking that edge back pretty dark, but it's still gray enough that I can see exactly where the flower starts. And we'll do the same thing on this one. So we'll say that's the edge of that leaf. If your brush is getting too gunked up and you're not getting a true black or a true white, you can go ahead and clean it off or just keep wiping it on your plate. And again, I kind of covered up that line there because I don't want that light against the flower. Just some solid black here. And I'm going to deepen this shadow right in here. Actually, I'm going to bring this part of the highlight up outside of the flower a little. Insinuate that the flower has a little bit of a fold in it. Or the leaf, I'm sorry, not the flower. This one back here is in the back behind the flower, so I'm not going to give it too bright of a highlight, and I'm really going to keep the highlight down toward the bottom of it, because I feel like it's kind of turned away from the from the light source, so just some of this medium gray. And then I'll get some solid black and just kind of smooth that in a bit. Maybe I'll put one teeny little bright spot just right there. All right, time to highlight our flowers and we're done. So I have a little bit of Diox Purple and a fresh blob of Titanium White, and I'm just gonna grab Diox Purple all on its own. I'm gonna do the same type of brush stroke that I used to get these black lines. Just kind of layer it right over the top. It doesn't have to be exact, it can be outside of the black lines. Just cover most of this black area. And this bright pop of purple in these flowers is going to be a really nice contrast to the yellow on the ground. Since yellow and purple are complementary colors, it's going to help create a lot of interest in this. You can really let it kind of fuzz out on the ends there. If this is a thistle, it might have some crazy hair. But again, I'm just using the very tip of the brush. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on it. Now I'm gonna grab a tiny speck of white. You can see that? Just a teeny tiny speck. And I'm gonna mix it in with my purple, get a slightly lighter color. And just like here, where we concentrated the highlights on the top portion and then slowly let it get darker, that's what we're gonna do. So I'm gonna start with this lighter color on the side that I want to be the lightest. Same brush stroke. See, it's really not much lighter than the color we just put on, but on the black it really stands out. You don't have to try and fill it all in. Let some of that black and some of the shadow really show through. Work slowly toward the darker side, and as you go, your paint will kind of get used up and you won't be applying quite so much paint when you get over to this darker side. Maybe just a little bit, enough so that you can see that texture, but not enough so it lightens it. And then we're gonna grab another bit of white and mix it back in with that spot. Again, starting on the lighter area. My brush strokes are getting a little bit smaller here. And they overlap. So I'm kind of starting up in the top half and then working my way down toward the bottom. Bringing just a tiny bit of it over to this lighter, or the darker side. More white. And again. This color, I am gonna stop right about there. I'm not taking it any farther. And now instead of bringing white over to my purple, I'm just gonna mix some white in with the purple that's on my brush and get a really light color. And that's about as far as I'm gonna take it. Mix some more white into there. I'm gonna get a color that is just barely purple, almost completely white. You might have to mix for a while to get all the purple out of your brush. There we go. Like that. My brush was actually getting so loaded up with paint that I was having a hard time keeping a sharp point, so I just cleaned it off, and then I'm loading up with that color. I think I'm gonna get just some pure white. And add a little right here where the black and white meets, just a tiny bit. This little guy is going to be pretty easy. We're just going to get some purple and fill him in. Mix a bit of white in there. Just do a little highlight down one side. A little more white. And a little more white. So kind of similar to how we did the branches. All right, now we're going to do this flower, and it'll be fairly similar to how we did the leaves. So I'm going to start with pure purple again and fill the entire thing in. Make sure you don't paint over your leaves, except that back one because it's behind the flower. And a little bit of white. And I'm going to keep my highlight right about here so it almost looks like a petal. So this flower is kind of dead and dreary looking, but at the same time, we still want it to feel like it has a little bit of life. And we're doing that through the colors that we use. A little more white. Smooth it in with that purple that I laid down first because it's still wet. A little brighter down the edge here. So like I said, this is similar to the leaves, but I am working on making the highlights a little bit smoother. Wipe off some of that and get some more of this dark purple because I don't want to take this highlight back too far. And then I'll give it just a little bit of a highlight right in here. And a little bright spot right there. And it's time to sign. And there is your super moody Fleur Noire. I hope you guys enjoyed painting this with me, and I was super excited to bring you another moody painting. It's been quite a while and I was definitely feeling it. If you don't like the moody feel of this painting, you can feel free to change up the colors and the shapes. Do whatever you like. Do a version that's kind of a mix between this and Fleur. You could do blue instead of the ivory black and have a bright, sunny, cloudy sky. Do green instead of the yellow for a grassy feel. And then do the original Fleur on here if you don't like the kind of dead, spooky look of this one. Make sure you check out the video description below where you can find a link to the new Art Monster Squad Facebook group. We would love if you would share your version of this painting with us there. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who you think would like it as well. Thank you as always for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.